So my name is Katie Hennessey, and I am the program coordinator here at Teen Treks now. And like I was just saying, I've led some trips for Teen Treks over the past few years, and um, pretty much got hooked and changed my life. And now I just love being able to hire leaders and recruit kids and see these trips still happen. And so what we did is we started this like bike touring education series. We wanted to do this to create community, especially in a time when we're all virtual anyways. And so we could all come together from our living rooms and talk about bikes and bike touring and dream of the future. And we also wanted to introduce you guys a little bit more to who Teen Treks is. And so that's what tonight is about. We're going to introduce you to what it's like to lead for Teen Treks. We have in particular that we're interviewing tonight, who's going to share his perspective on just what his trip was like and just the day-to-day life of leading. Let's see here. Sorry. Okay, but to get us started, I want to go ahead and introduce Cliff. I know some of you guys know him already, but he's the director and founder of Teen Treks and has been running this company for about 20 some years. And anyways, he's a huge bike traveler himself. I'm pretty sure he's off in the Florida coast right now traveling. So Cliff is my favorite bike touring guru, and tonight he is here to just introduce who Teen Treks is. Go ahead, Cliff.
Hi, thanks for joining us. Again, my name is Cliff Maydell. I've been with Teen Treks, started Teen Treks in 2001. This will be our 20th season of running bike trips. It's all pretty exciting. So today I thought maybe I'd just talk about what are popular trips that people are signing up for. We're well into our registration, and we have probably the most popular trip is the 1,000 mile, which is great. It's a really great trip that goes from Chicago to New York City. And we have quite a few kids signed up for 2 different dates of that trip. The Amsterdam-Paris is also a real popular trip this year, and I really hope that we're, as Americans, allowed into Europe so that we can actually pull it off. But it goes from Amsterdam to Paris, starts in Amsterdam and bikes south. Really fun trip. That seems to be very popular. We have 2 dates of that that teens are signed up for. Maine coast seems to be a popular trip this year. New York, Montreal trips are always popular. And Cape Cod. So those are the major trips that so far have significant registrations. We have 17 trips in all. Every summer we don't get out all of these trips, but we do our best to get out as many as we can. And we try to get a spectrum of these different trips. Anyway, thanks for joining us tonight. I hope you come biking with us this summer. As a leader, as a teenager, as a trekker, we look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
Thanks. Awesome. Okay, so Ben Ingalls is here with us tonight. So this event is called Daily Life of a Bike Tour Leader for Teen Treks. And so right now we're currently hiring leaders for the summer of 2021. So we did want to give those who might have interest in leading a bike tour some insight into what it's like, if in case you are interested, or this is a good place for future trekkers to come see what their leaders are going to be like. So either way, there's something for everyone here. So I'm just going to introduce Ben Ingalls. He was our leader in the 2019 summer, and he led New York Montreal trek as well as Maine coast. And I got the pleasure of leading that trip with him. And we had a small group there, but we had a blast. And he's honestly one of the most spontaneous leaders that I've led with, and just had a lot of fun with him. And then him and I did a trip on our own after that from Boston, New York City, met a bunch of people, had a blast, and probably one of the most unforgettable times of my life. Ben is from Buffalo. And when he's not touring, he is into skiing in the winter and hiking and camping in warmer weather. And he's also super involved in some environmental justice nonprofits. And he's about to go to carpentry school. So he's kind of a well-rounded dude. So Ben, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about how you first heard about Teen Treks?
Sure. Yeah. So my first experience with Teen Tracks was really more so like my first experience with Cliff. I went to a bike touring workshop at a local like bicycle and pedestrian advocacy nonprofit that we have in Buffalo, New York. It's a pretty cool group. But they were hosting a workshop where they were just kind of teaching the uninitiated about bicycle touring, and Cliff was one of their guests. So I was there just as someone who had heard a little bit about traveling by bicycle and wanted to learn more. And Cliff was talking about it, and I was like, this sounds really cool. I didn't know that there were groups that like treated this as kind of like a summer camp. So I talked to him about it, and he was like, "Yeah, you should check it out. You should lead one of our trips." And I was like, "I don't know, Cliff. I've never really worked with kids before." He's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter." And then I was like, "But I don't have a bike either." He's like, "Ah, it doesn't matter." So I got a bike and I signed up. I interviewed. I got first aid certified, and we made it happen. And that was my intro to Teen Treks.
All right, sweet. Okay, so what did you find when you did finally start leading a trip? What experiences did you have that really helped you on the trip?
Well, like I said, I hadn't really spent a ton of time working with youth before. Um, I have a younger sister, and so just that kind of dynamic, like I have a teenage sister, and kind of being around her as someone who's just a little bit older than a teenager. I mean, obviously, I was also like somewhat recently a teenager, so I kind of have like some insight as to what it's like to be just like a young adult um, that wants to try new things. Uh, but beyond that, like not a ton of experience directly working with youth. I think one of the most helpful things was just the fact that I can, it's kind of easy for me to get excited about stuff. And so being around a group of kids who maybe, are a little nervous about doing something that they haven't really experienced before, they're on this adventure, um, which is something that I enjoy. I like going on trips. I like traveling. I like adventures. And so I was like really enthusiastic the whole time. It was like just as much of an adventure for me as it was for everyone else there. So I think that kind of sentiment was helpful, because it helped me kind of like connect with the kids. We were all kind of in it together, and it kind of, I think I was able to keep spirits somewhat on the up and up, with that kind of outlook. So that was helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so for those of us who have maybe never been on a trip before, can you describe just what the day-to-day life is, and especially as a leader, what does your role entail on the trip?
Yeah. So day to day, I mean, we're camping for the most part, with some hostels and some hotels sprinkled in between. In the mornings, you kind of get up, roll out of tent or hammock, and just start kind of like stirring the group awake. Either I would start breakfast, or I would kind of like push one of the kids to start breakfast, depending on like how things been going and who is showing initiative in different ways. Um, from there, so this is probably like maybe 8 in the morning, and then you maybe spend like an hour around campsite just getting everything together, packed up, kind of get the maps out for the day, and make a plan as a group. Eat, do some stretching, safety check of the bikes, make sure everything's packed away, and then you kind of hit the road. And for the most part, I mean, a lot of the day is just kind of riding, I mean, obviously, we're trying to get somewhere between like 35 and like if you're doing one of the across America trips, like, I don't know, 70, 80 miles done in a day. But I don't think any of the trips I did were super crazy in how many miles we were doing. And so it was just, ride, get distracted by something, sit in a park, have a snack, read a sign, look at the views, play some games with the kids. At some point in the middle of the day, you stop at a grocery store. You go in with two of the youth, whoever the dedicated dinner team is, and they kind of decide what they want to cook for everyone, and you kind of strategize together about how you're going to make that work. And then from there, maybe you find a park sit down, sit in a circle, chat with everyone, learn about what's going on with the group, with the biking, play some games again, throw a frisbee around. And from there, you just kind of get back on the road and get distracted again. Maybe someone will flag you down and be just dumbfounded by the fact that you're all living off of your bicycles, and they'll like buy you ice cream or something like that. And then you keep biking some more, and then you get distracted by something. Then you can't really like fully continue to get distracted by that, because if you're like me, that'll happen too many times, and you'll get to the campsite after dark, and you don't want that to happen. So you just got to maybe skip the later distractions. And then you get to the campsite, set up shop. Yeah, there's usually a split up between like who's setting the tents up, who starts on dinner. You get everything set up there, and then do it again the next day. I don't know. That's pretty much what a day looks like for the most part. I mean, there's various other things mixed in at certain points, whether it be like a mechanical breakdown or maybe like an emotional breakdown, depending on like how the kids are doing. But for the most part, everything gets worked out, and it goes well. Yeah, that's pretty much the day.
Yeah, that's a good description.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a lot of our trips are we have a lot of autonomy as leaders. And so if we feel like the group is interested in something, or as leaders we're interested in something, we'll kind of like take initiative. But also some days it's just like you only have like 35 miles to cover, and you've got, 10 hours of daylight. So you're finding a lot of adventures along the way. So Ben, what did you find some of your favorite side adventures were? Some of the things that you found to do on the side of the road as you're biking that appealed to you and that your group really liked?
Well, I tried to stop at like I really enjoyed the fact that we were just kind of rolling through small towns a lot of the time. So I try to like learn as much as I could about the place we were going through. I kind of made a rule that we'd stop at all of the, public maps and informative signs, maybe see what the historical and natural landmarks in the area were. So that was always fun. Because that's something that you don't really do as much of when you're driving from place to place. You're kind of moving too quick to just pull off to the road to the side for a second and just like take it in, learn a little bit. What else? Lots of swimming. For both of my trips, I had great weather. On the second trip I don't think we got rained on a single time while we were riding. And so we were definitely eager to find places to swim. I think that was a rule, or kind of a dogma that you brought up at one point, Katie, that you'll never regret jumping in a body of water.
My firm belief.
Which, like, maybe that's true, I don't know. But for the most part, we swam whenever there was an opportunity to do so. So that was a lot of fun. What else? I don't know, like thrift shopping. We were just kind of whatever is around. You really have no idea what you're going to run into. And so just like constantly being surprised by the things that we were coming upon was just a lot of fun, regardless of what it was. I never knew what was in store for a day, We came across like a circus a couple of times, actually, on one of my trips. There was a circus on the lawn of the FDR house on the Hudson River, and then there was another circus like up in Montreal, just like on a street, that we really enjoyed, just kind of strolling through on our way to get some poutine, but just all sorts of things. Yeah, eating lots of ice cream, etc., etc., etc.
Okay, so you led two trips in 2019, and they were totally different group dynamics. Can you describe a little bit of the type of groups you led, what their size was, and maybe were they bikers, were they beginner bikers? Just give me a little bit of overview of what kind of groups you led.
Yeah, so the first trip I did, there were 10 teens and 2 leaders, which was obviously kind of like the top end of how big one of these trips will be. And with a group that size, there's always some kind of like balancing to do, because like some of the kids, like one kid's going to be just like an active like member of the cross country team, and he's just going to excel and just like want to be very, capable of keeping up pace regardless of like what the terrain looks like for the day. And maybe someone else on the group just like prefers to kind of like I don't know, not run 10 miles a day after school. And so they'll maybe have a little bit more work to do in terms of dealing with like the hills of the Hudson Valley on the first few days coming out of New York City. And so you kind of find ways to balance things out in that regard. The teens have different roles on the trips. One of them, and they vary day by day. So like you assign someone at the beginning of the day to like take the lead. Sometimes it's nice to have, you know, the cross country star do that because they'll very much be able to like stay out in front of the pack and keep a good pace and drive the group along. But on other days, you know, if you have like a straggler the whole time that's really struggling to keep up, maybe put them in front the next day. And it's kind of nice to have them kind of set the pace and everyone can just be together and not worry too much about exactly how fast you're going all day long. So there are certain ways you kind of have to balance a group that big. And there are different personalities that you kind of have to work with too. And so that's like a whole nother thing regardless. I mean, there's like, yeah, the physical aspect of the fact that you're kind of biking all day long, but then there's also, you get some class clowns in the mix and you got to kind of figure out how to make all of that work too. But overall, I think it was like a very, very functional experience. I think we really had a good time together. And then the second trip I did was much smaller. There were 3 of us and then you and I, Katie. So we led 3 youths and it was a bit more intimate. I mean, we were all kind of, sometimes when like with 2 leaders and 10 kids, you kind of have to really be corralling everyone because they can be feisty. But then if it's 3 kids, you can kind of all just, you're more, almost more integrated. Not that I wasn't integrated as much on the first one, but like, it's just the 5 of you. So you can kind of have like a more small group dynamic. It's a little bit more intimate and you just kind of, you make it work, whatever it may be. I don't know. You kind of just figure out as you go and do what you can to make the group work as well as possible and just see what happens.
Yeah. So looking back at your trips, as you reflect on them, what would you say was the most rewarding part of being a bike trip leader?
I think just forming bonds and seeing new things and having novel experiences with strangers. I mean, initially strangers and then people that you develop relationships with. This was a totally new thing for me and I had an excellent time and it was a totally new thing for a lot of the people I was doing it with. And I think they had a good time too. And I was able to sort of form friendships with them. Some of the kids like still will text me out of the blue and like see how I'm doing, which is funny. It was just, especially because it can be kind of like a physically demanding thing and you're overcoming these obstacles along the way. You're helping one another like with their bikes or with, you know, talk about things that they're dealing with at home or how they're feeling with the group or how they're feeling physically. And so it can feel really good to have difficult moments that you kind of work through, you know, with, you know, one person that needs to work through it or as a whole group, you know, there's like hill after hill after hill at the end of the day, and to kind of like all roll into camp together is really satisfying. And so I think there are a lot of really rewarding moments. I don't know that I can just pick one, but yeah.
And then as you, as a leader, looking at one of your trekkers, how would you think that would be a beneficial experience for them to take a trip like this, or just a fun experience?
Well, I think a lot of kids that age, I won't speak for like everyone that age, but I think a lot of times when you're a teenager, you kind of spend a lot of years with the same kids. At least I did. I kind of went to like smaller schools when I was younger. And so if I had been 15, 16, 17 years old and just kind of like jumped on this 2.5-week trip with, you know, 11 strangers, that would have been, I think, really helpful for me because I don't think when I was that age, I had ever really done anything where I kind of had to just like really, you know, figure out a new group dynamic and make it work and make friends like in that kind of demanding of a setting where it's kind of all day, all night for a few weeks. And then on top of that, you know, you're rolling through new places, you're kind of learning some basic skills like grocery shopping. You got to cook for the group a few times. You're learning how to work on your bike. You're learning how to, again, like I was saying before, you know, just deal with obstacles that are standing in your way, whatever they may be. And I think that all of that can be kind of emboldening, you know, and they can help you kind of feel good about yourself and feel like you're capable of, you know, accomplishing things. It can be a nice confidence boost, I think, overall, because it is a feat. You know, you rode your bike 500 miles across the state or across the country, you know, whatever it may be, depending on the trip you're doing, or over borders, you know, all these different things. And it, you know, it felt good for me at the end. Like I was proud of what I did, and can only imagine like what a 15, 16-year-old is feeling like at the end of a trip like that. So I think that can be like a really nice thing to walk away from one of these trips with.
Yeah, it's a huge accomplishment. Yeah, and I've seen kids who didn't seem to have a good time, or you didn't think they were having a good time, but at the end they didn't want to leave. They couldn't wait to get on another bike trip. They couldn't believe they had done so many miles when they looked at the map. And so it's really rewarding seeing that through the kids' eyes sometimes.